Everything began with love, real, sincere, devoted down to the smallest details, with flowers for no reason, notes left on a pillow, candlelit dinners. He thought that was strength. Turned out, it was a sentence. When you're seen as too kind, they start to eat you alive. Slowly. First goes respect, then boundaries, then you. But even the gentlest can become a predator when cornered, especially if he knows how to wait, to remember, to listen. They thought he'd stay silent, swallow it, forgive. What they didn't realize was this. He knew how to strike back so precisely, punishment turned into performance. With flashing police lights, TV cameras, handcuffs, and fake smiles wiped away in a blink. No one noticed the moment he stopped being a husband. He became a director. And when the curtain fell, he was the only one who heard the applause. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now, let's get started. There was a time when I truly believed that the more love you showed a woman, the more attention you gave, the more you fulfilled her desires, the more she'd cherish having you in her life. I don't think that way anymore. Now, I believe that kind of devotion can have the opposite effect. Instead of appreciation, it breeds complacency. She begins to believe that she can act however she wants, unchecked, because either you won't notice, or worse, you'll excuse it. I first met Emma during our freshman year of college. We started seeing each other, but our connection was unpredictable, full of starts and stops. There was a strong physical pull between us, no doubt, but neither of us was looking for anything serious at the time. It wasn't until the middle of our senior year that we reconnected in a more meaningful way. That time, we stuck together. Within 6 months of graduating, we were married. Not long after that, my parents celebrated their 25th anniversary. During the party, I found a moment alone with my dad and asked him what their secret was. I brought up how many of our friends' relationships were constantly turbulent, always arguing, always on edge. I asked him, "How did you and Mom avoid falling into that pattern?" He smiled gently and said, "The secret is to show her every single day that you love her. Not just with words, but with action. Never assume she just knows. You have to make it clear, consistently. That's what keeps the connection alive." I took those words to heart. For the next 7 years, I made it a personal mission to never let a day pass without showing Emma how much she meant to me. I remembered every birthday, every anniversary, no matter how small. I even made up new ones, just to give us something more to celebrate. She got a bouquet on the anniversary of the first time she cooked meatloaf. I gave her a handwritten note after she ran her first load of laundry in our brand new machines. When she earned a promotion, I treated it like a national holiday. On the anniversary of our first night together, she received chocolates and roses. I gave her diamond earrings to mark our first time being intimate. Sometimes I'd send flowers to her office for no reason other than to say, "I love you." I made sure she felt special, every day. That was the philosophy my father had lived by, and I followed it religiously. But what I failed to understand, what my father never mentioned, was that not all women interpret love the same way. To my mom, those little acts were constant affirmations of devotion. But to Emma, they began to seem like desperation. She saw me not as someone honoring her, but as someone clinging, always eager for her approval, always seeking reassurance. In trying to lift her up, I somehow diminished myself in her eyes. I didn't notice it happening. I honestly thought we were in a good place. Our careers were thriving. Our lives were busy but fulfilling. We were both putting in long hours, sometimes traveling, sometimes barely seeing one another during the week. I assumed it was all part of building a life together. I figured she understood that, just like I did. And when we did have time together, I went all in. Our physical connection was still electric. There were weekends where we barely left our bedroom. Emma would look at me, smiling, and say things like, "You have me, all of me, always." And I believed her. That belief was shattered at her company's Christmas party. It was held downtown in a hotel ballroom. Her employer had gone all out, reserving rooms for guests and setting up a formal evening. The party started at 7. I had a client in from out of town that morning and told Emma I'd arrive late, probably around 8:30. But plans changed last minute. The client extended his trip, giving me an unexpected window. I got to the hotel around 7:30 instead. As I stepped into the ballroom, my eyes landed on Emma, wrapped in the arms of a man I didn't recognize. I wasn't familiar with most of her co-workers, having only met a few at company events over the years. But it wasn't his identity that bothered me. It was how closely she held him. Her arms were around his waist, their bodies too familiar. I kept a quiet distance as they left the ballroom and walked down a side hallway that led to a small area with 3 guest rooms. I wasn't sure which room they entered, so I checked them one by one. The first was empty, the second also vacant. I was about to try the third when I paused. I heard faint laughter. The room looked undisturbed, but I stepped inside to investigate. That's when I heard another giggle, this one clearer and from above. It was coming through the air vent. That's when it hit me. The voices were coming from the room next door. I turned toward the final door just as Emma's voice filtered through the vent. "Careful. Don't rip the dress. You'll never get what you want that way." Then came the man's voice. "God, Emma, I could stare at these all night. Let me taste those incredible curves." She laughed softly. "Not yet. You know the rules. I get my toy first. No touching until I've had my turn." I heard clothes shifting, the sound of a zipper, and then her voice again. I'll never get tired of that. Are you sure we don't have time to sneak into one of the rooms?" Her tone turned pleading. "I need you. Right now." His response was calm. "We already had lunch, and Monday night. You'll survive until tomorrow." "I can't go through with this." "You don't have much of a say." "Ethan said he'd be here by 8:30. I was supposed to be around when he showed up. If he gets here early and sees me coming down with post-sex hair and a guilty glow, he's going to start asking questions. That's the last thing we need." "Come on, Emma. If he's half as clueless as you claim, we could be at it right in front of him, and he'd still be none the wiser." "I get it, babe. I could always tell him to head out early, say we'll catch up another time. Then I'd laugh it off, say we were just playing a prank. He'd probably fall for it. But just because I can manipulate the situation doesn't mean I want to create a whole circus. Are you absolutely sure we can't sneak upstairs for a quick one?" "It's not worth the gamble, honey, but I can still help take the pressure off." There was a beat of silence. Then a groan low in his throat. "God, Emma, you're unreal. Whatever magic you work with that mouth, nothing compares. Nobody's ever made me feel like this." The sounds didn't fade. They escalated, grew sharper, more intense, until they finally broke into silence. "Rick is going to flip when I tell him you helped me blow off steam while he has to wait until tomorrow. Unless he doesn't have to." "Didn't you just say today was off limits?" "I said we couldn't use the guest suite. I never said anything about this room." "How the hell do you pull this kind of thing off?" "Rick's not showing up before your husband. What we just did took no time at all. I'll introduce you to Ethan. Excuse myself for a bathroom break. While you're chatting, I'll sneak back in here, give Rick what he's owed, and be back before anyone notices." "Jesus, Emma. You're something else. I know, darling. That's why you keep crawling back. So what now? You gonna rinse or kiss your husband with my taste still on your tongue? Wouldn't be the first time he's had a little bit of you." "You're twisted, Emma, rotten to the core. Let's go. We've got a party to host." It's wild how quickly love curdles into hate. One moment, your heart's full. The next, it's a clenched fist. I stood there, caught between storming in and flipping the place upside down, or staying hidden and gathering what I needed. Should I blow it up now, or hold my fire and collect receipts, names, times, faces? If I confronted them tonight, it would dissolve into a courtroom circus. He said, "She lied." I'd say I overheard them. She'd deny everything. I needed more than just rage. I needed leverage. Bursting in would feel good, sure, but then I'd lose my only chance to find out who Rick was, or if there were others besides Rick and the guy in that room with Emma. No. I still had a way to get even. Just not tonight. I walked out quietly and waited in my car, patient, focused, planning. Waiting for the right time, the moment I'd ask Emma to come meet me. When I stepped into the ballroom, I spotted her immediately, sitting at a table with two couples and one guy. Emma's about 173 centimeters. The guy beside her looked maybe 10 centimeters taller, give or take based on proportions. Around 183 centimeters by my guess. Dark, wavy hair, a razor-thin mustache that looked almost drawn on. Even from across the room it was clear he was good-looking. She saw me, stood up, and stepped forward with arms open, leaned in for a kiss. I turned just enough that her lips met my cheek instead. She blinked, a flicker of confusion on her face. "I think I'm catching something," I said softly. "Don't want to get you sick." She gave a small smile and a nod, then introduced me to the table. The good-looking guy? His name was Francis. He stood to shake my hand. My estimate was dead accurate, eye level. I'm 183 myself, and we matched. That mattered. I wanted to know how he'd measure up if things ever got physical. We all sat back down, made small talk. Her co-workers chatted, but I could feel something off. The couples seemed restless, like they were waiting for a cue. I danced with Emma, twice. During the second song, she leaned in close and whispered, "This little virus isn't going to stop you from tearing my clothes off later, is it? I've been craving you all day." "Sure, Emma. I bet." I wanted to hit her with a cold, "Not tonight, Emma." But I didn't. I never called her that. Only Francis did. I wasn't ready to show my hand, so I played along. "Depends how I'm feeling when we get back." What she didn't know was, I would never touch her again. When the music faded and we returned to the table, another guy had joined the group, deep in conversation with Francis. Emma leaned in and introduced him. Rick. About 183 centimeter, maybe 82 kilos. Smooth palms. A jawline that looked like it had never faced a real challenge. I logged every detail. Not long after, Rick excused himself and headed toward another table. I tracked him out of the corner of my eye. No surprise, he detoured into the hallway where Emma and Francis had already made their earlier rendezvous. Apparently, while we were dancing, Francis had prepped the room. A couple of minutes passed, then Emma stood, kissed my cheek again, and said she needed the restroom. Francis waited a beat, then turned to me. "What do you think about the Broncos' odds at the Super Bowl?" That's when it clicked. Emma must have told him I was a football nut. This was his distraction play, designed to hold my attention while she vanished with Rick. I humored him, answered, chatted. But my eyes stayed fixed on the hallway door. And sure enough, less than a minute later, Emma slipped in after Rick. It took almost 15 minutes before Emma finally returned to the table. I kept up casual chatter with Francis, making no indication that I'd noticed how long she'd been gone. When she came back, we hit the dance floor again. She pulled herself tight against me and murmured into my ear, "I'm so turned on right now, baby. Don't let me down tonight." Once we were back at the table, Rick asked her to dance. As they moved toward the floor, I caught one of the women at our table shooting me a sly smile. Her look reminded me of that old saying, the husband is always the last to figure it out. When Rick brought her back, Francis took his turn, and I noticed the two women exchanging a subtle, knowing look. I stored that moment away. If her antics were that transparent to her co-workers, then getting what I needed wouldn't be a challenge. Emma continued mingling, sharing dances with several of her higher-ups, and eventually ended up sitting beside her boss at his desk for a good 15 minutes. When she returned to me, she leaned close and said under her breath, "All done, baby. The right people saw me. I did my job." "Let's go home," she whispered. "And get ready. I want you bad." We'd driven separately, so I told her to go on ahead and gave her plenty of time. I wanted her home, stripped down, lying on the bed like she'd said she would be. That was part of the setup. I drove slowly, deliberately, ensuring she'd be exactly where I needed her. When I arrived, I hurried upstairs, rushed into the bathroom, and launched into an elaborate performance, pretending I was having some sort of stomach issue. I stayed in there a few minutes, adding groans for effect, ran the sink for background noise, and wiped my forehead with a damp towel to look the part. Then I stepped into the bedroom. As expected, Emma was there, nude and waiting. "Sorry, babe," I muttered. "Something's off. I don't think I can do anything tonight. I'm crashing in the guest room. I'll call the doctor tomorrow." The look on her face as I walked out said it all, furious. The next morning, I was already seated at the kitchen table with a coffee when she walked in. I did my best to look drained and unwell. "Any better?" she asked. "Not really. Barely got any sleep," I told her, checking the time. "The doctor's office won't be open until 8:30, I added. "I should probably call in sick." As she poured her coffee and went to get ready, she reminded me, "Don't forget, I'll be home late. Still stuck on that damn budget draft. It's due Tuesday." "Right," I said, pretending to hang up the phone without actually dialing. Once she was out the door, I got dressed, handled the urgent tasks at work, and told my assistant I'd be out the rest of the day for a doctor's appointment. Then I headed to the public library. There, I sifted through directories until I located the contact details for Francis Clayton and Rick Torres. Using the library computers, I dug deeper into Emma's company, gathering names of executives, board members, and department heads. I collected addresses, phone numbers, career backgrounds, and started to identify the ones most likely to panic when scandal reared its head. The prospects looked good. If my gut was right, even the faintest hint of misconduct would bring their whole house of cards tumbling down, Emma, Rick, Francis, and all. That evening, I parked near Emma's office and waited. At 4:10 sharp, she left the building, got into her car, and drove across town. I followed. She pulled into a motel parking lot, walked up to room 131, and after a light knock, Rick opened the door and let her in. 20 minutes later, Francis arrived. He parked, got out, and headed straight for the same room. Seemed like they were having one hell of a strategy meeting about that budget. I couldn't help but think how committed these employees were, putting in unpaid overtime to finalize their proposal. Then again, maybe one of them had slipped in a reimbursement form. Yeah, that had to be it. I jotted down Francis's car make, model, and license plate, then headed home. On the drive, I considered what else I'd uncovered about Rick and Francis. Both were married, though I hadn't yet figured out if their relationships were solid or already crumbling. One thing was obvious. They hadn't shown up to the office party. That raised questions. I needed more on them. Maybe they'd have roles in the final scene of the story I was constructing, the one where all three of them went down together, Emma, Rick, and Francis. I also started piecing together things I'd ignored before. Emma always stayed late on Mondays and Thursdays. I'd never questioned it. She claimed Mondays were tough due to weekend overflow, and Thursdays were crunch time for Friday reports. Why had I accepted that so easily? Love clouds judgment, and I'd been completely blind. Only now was I starting to grasp the full scope of my own stupidity. Later that night, I was lying in bed pretending to read when I heard her come in. I turned off the light, shut the book, and stayed still with my eyes closed. She peeked into the room, then quietly closed the door and headed to her own. A few minutes later, I heard the shower running. Sleep evaded me. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thoughts racing, plotting how to take all three of them down in one swift, calculated move. It had to be simultaneous. I couldn't afford to let one of them catch wind of what happened to the others and slip away. When the curtain fell, they'd all know who pulled the strings, and exactly why. That truth hit me like a punch. I sat up, clicked on the lamp, and picked up the book I'd been pretending to read. It was a gripping story, one of a man wrongfully convicted of murder. He'd been sentenced on the strength of fabricated evidence, while a relentless attorney and a sharp-witted private investigator raced against time to prove his innocence before the execution date arrived. That was enough intensity for one night, I thought, placing the book gently on the nightstand and switching off the lamp. My mind finally clear and resolute, I slipped into a deep, undisturbed sleep. Friday morning, I told Emma the doctor had diagnosed me with a stomach virus. The medication, he'd said, should handle the symptoms, and all I needed now was rest. I mentioned I still felt a bit wiped out, though the doctor was confident I'd be well enough to return to work by Monday. He'd suggested I take it easy over the weekend. Emma held my face in her hands and smiled softly. "Rest and get your strength back, love. You're going to need it." She left for work, while I stayed behind with the heavy weight of everything I'd uncovered. After getting dressed, I headed out to dig deeper. By the day's end, I learned Francis's wife, who worked as a legal secretary, hadn't made it to the party because she was out of town taking care of her ill mother. Rick's wife, a real estate agent, had skipped the event to close a deal on a $2 million listing. From the outside, their marriages looked perfectly stable, but that illusion only held because their wives had no clue what was really going on. I promised myself I would make things right, and soon. I spent the weekend resting, playing the role of the recovering husband. On Sunday, I told Emma I was feeling much better and planned to return to the office Monday. I was still slightly off balance, but I figured I could handle it if I paced myself. That Monday night, I followed Emma to the same motel, only this time, she went into room 146. Francis was already waiting at the door to let her in. 5 minutes later, Rick arrived and joined them. I scribbled down Rick's license plate number and drove home. I knew the risks, but I didn't care. The fact that I was ready to put everything on the line told me just how deep my thirst for revenge had grown. It was going to be expensive, but if it worked, it would be worth every cent. I reached out to some discreet contacts, people with connections, and eventually set up a late-night meeting in a dimly lit parking lot. That's where I got exactly what I needed. By the following Sunday, everything was ready. On Monday morning, once Emma had left for work, I committed to the final phase. That evening, I tailed her once more to the same motel. When she, Francis, and Rick were all inside room 136, I got out of my car and walked over to Francis's vehicle. It was unlocked. I opened the trunk and slipped half a pound of marijuana behind the spare tire. Rick's car was locked, but I came prepared. I pulled out the Slim Jim I'd bought from Snap-on Tools and managed to pop the lock. I placed a full pound of weed in his trunk, locked it up again, and left an ounce on the rear bumper, just enough to justify a police search. Then I drove a short distance to a payphone and dialed the police. "There's a drug deal happening in room 136 at the Seabreeze Motel," I told the dispatcher, rattling off the license plate numbers of Emma, Francis, and Rick. When asked for my name, I just laughed. "Not a chance. I'm not getting killed over this," I said, and hung up. From there, I found another payphone and called all 3 local TV news stations, feeding them the same tip I'd given to the police. The new mayor had just won the election on a hardline anti-drug campaign, so I knew the police would act fast, and the media would be hungry for the footage. Using a third payphone, I reached out to Francis's and Rick's wives, letting them know their husbands were holed up at the Seabreeze Motel in room 136 with another woman. Then I drove back and parked a discreet distance away, settling in to watch the show. Within 10 minutes, the first squad cars pulled up, though they took another 30 to organize the raid. A couple of patrol cars arrived first, followed by a SWAT van and 2 unmarked vehicles filled with plainclothes detectives. News vans were already parked and rolling. I watched as 2 SWAT officers slammed the door open with a battering ram, while 4 more stormed inside with weapons drawn. Oh, how I wished I could have seen the look on Emma's face in that moment. 3 minutes later, all three were marched out in cuffs. Francis and Rick were in shorts. Emma, completely nude, had a blanket barely draped over her. I hit speed dial and called Emma's company president. "Did you know 3 of your middle managers are running a drug ring straight from your office?" I asked. I gave him their names and told him what was unfolding at the motel right then. I followed that with calls to each of the 5 board members. The police found exactly what I'd planted. Francis's and Rick's cars held the weed, just as planned, and they found an ounce of cocaine in Emma's purse, along with another 4 ounces hidden under the seat in her car. I couldn't tell if Francis's and Rick's wives were in the crowd, but I sure hoped they were there to see the whole thing fall apart. The bust led the 10 o'clock news on both Channel 2 and Channel 7. I actually laughed when the Channel 7 anchor said, "Mayor Reeves has made good on his promise. A major drug operation was dismantled today at a local motel. No official word yet on the arrests." Footage rolled of the 3 being let out in cuffs. The anchor urged viewers to stay tuned for updates. I turned off the TV, silenced my phone, and went to bed. Emma called not long after, sobbing, begging me to take out a second mortgage to cover her bail. I laughed and ignored her. Eventually, she convinced her parents to come up with the money. When she came home, she found every lock changed and all her belongings boxed up neatly on the driveway. "Why are you doing this?" she cried, stunned. "Because I don't respect who you are anymore, and I won't share a life with someone like that," I said coldly. "You don't understand. Please just hear me out. I understood everything I needed to the moment I saw you naked and handcuffed on the news," I replied, closing the door. I helped her father load her boxes into the U-Haul, but didn't exchange a single word with him. Emma kept calling multiple times a day, but I never picked up. When she tried showing up at my office, I had security escort her out without incident. Not long after, all 3, Emma, Rick, and Francis, were fired. Their legal troubles only got worse. Despite it being their first offense, the mayor's strict no-leniency policy meant no plea deals, no probation. The slap on the wrist they might have expected never came. Claiming innocence didn't do them any favors, not when they were literally found holding the evidence. Emma only dug herself in deeper when she demanded a drug test to prove she wasn't using. The test came back squeaky clean, 0 traces of anything, which the prosecution immediately flipped on her. If she wasn't using, they argued, then those drugs had to be for selling, not personal use. The mayor, eager to score quick wins with his new anti-drug initiative, was applying pressure on the system. So, the 3 of them were given an offer: serve a year in prison and complete 2,000 hours of community service. If they stayed out of trouble, they could be out in 9 months. Their lawyer didn't mince words. He told them flat out that going to trial would destroy them. So they took the deal. While Emma served her time, I filed the divorce papers. Francis's wife did the same, and so did Rick's. They each served their sentence, and when they were released, I kept close watch. When the timing was right, I paid Rick a visit. I later heard he wound up in the emergency room with a shattered arm and 3 cracked ribs. He could have pressed charges, technically, but he didn't. Maybe guilt sealed his lips. Francis had moved in with Emma by then, and one night, I saw the 2 of them walking out of a bar together. I handled Francis first. Then I turned to Emma and said, "Not bad for someone you used to call a pushover, huh, Emma? Remember that Christmas party? The one where you and Francis sneaked off to the back room? Think back to what he told you that night. That if I was really as spineless as you claimed, the 2 of you could screw around right under my nose and I wouldn't lift a finger. Sound familiar, Emma?" Her face changed. You could almost watch the realization dawn on her, piece by piece. I let out a laugh. "Yeah, Emma, that so-called pushover finally evened the score. You might want to call someone for your boyfriend. He's not in the best shape right now." She stood frozen, eyes locked on mine, as I slid into my car and drove off. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you. He didn't know that the wine at dinner that night would mark the beginning of the end. 10 years beside a woman he saw as his rock, his love, his home. And then, one conversation, one sentence, sharp enough to shatter everything like an axe through thin ice. "I think we should have an open marriage," she said, and in that moment, something in his mind just flipped. What followed felt like slow motion, awkward excuses, talk of liberation, a new chapter, modern relationships. But the truth was far simpler. She already had someone. He could feel it. And now, everything he believed in was crumbling beneath the weight of pretty words and ugly actions. But this isn't a story about a broken man. It's about what happens when someone stares into the darkest part of love, survives betrayal, stands tall against hypocrisy, and most importantly, responds. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now let's get started. For 10 years, I believed I was part of a strong, loving partnership. I never thought I'd hear the woman I married, Hazel, suggest we turn our monogamous marriage into something open. We had crafted a life that felt solid, fulfilling. Her career in marketing was on an upward climb, and I was gradually moving closer to my goal of illustrating comic books professionally. I felt a real, passionate bond between us, genuine and unshakable. But then one evening, she came home carrying a strange new energy I couldn't quite place. During dinner, she let out a long breath and looked at me with a seriousness that sent a chill down my spine. "Alistair, I've been giving something a lot of thought lately," she said slowly. "I think we should try having an open marriage." My fork slipped, hitting the plate with a loud clink. "What are you talking about?" I asked, stunned. "Where is this even coming from?" "I miss the excitement," she said with unsettling calm. "The feeling of being wanted, of being chased." "Excitement?" I echoed, fighting to steady my voice. "You're willing to throw everything we have into chaos just because you miss flirting?" "Hazel, this isn't some college fling," she bristled. "You're stuck in the past, Alistair. I'm not ending what we have. I'm trying to expand it. If we approach this with honesty, it can work." "So you expect me to be okay with you sleeping with other people?" I asked, my voice barely hiding the disbelief. She launched into a long, rehearsed explanation. She claimed it wasn't about betrayal, but about empowerment, about rekindling the spark of being seen, desired by others. "It's a form of liberation," she argued. "This doesn't mean I love you any less. But if you say no, you're just proving you're jealous, controlling. Love should be able to withstand something like this." I sat there, speechless, trying to process the person in front of me. Was this really Hazel? The woman I had shared my life with for a decade? "I've heard this story before," I said eventually, fingers interlocked, my gaze fixed on her. "Videos online, forums, husbands whose wives suddenly want open marriages." Her eyes sparked like I had just given her validation. "And do you know what they all say?" I continued. "Almost every time, the wife already has someone lined up, or she's already involved with someone else." Her confident expression faltered. Her gaze dropped, her lips tightening. The silence stretched between us like an accusation. "So," I said, every word deliberate, "who is he, Hazel?" "There's no one else," she shot back, her voice rising in protest. "How can you even suggest that?" "What else am I supposed to think?" I replied sharply. "You're asking for permission to be with other men, and you act like it's just a harmless idea." What followed was a chaotic mess of denials, justifications, and idealistic ramblings. She insisted she wasn't cheating, that she only believed in the idea of an open marriage. But I'd had enough. "No," I said, voice firm and cold. "Absolutely not. And now you've given me a reason to seriously question everything about this marriage." I held her gaze, letting the silence hang once more. You know what those same husbands say? The moment your partner brings this up? I paused, delivering the line like a judgment. That's the moment you should start preparing for divorce. Her face went pale. Alistair, please don't say that. That's not what I wanted. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just exploring something. Can't we talk more? I love you. I don't want to lose us. But the words rang hollow. I stood up, gathered my half-eaten meal, and scraped it into the trash. The food now tasted like nothing. I rinsed my plate, dropped it in the sink, and grabbed my wallet, keys, and coat. She stayed seated at the table, silent and still. The days that followed were quiet. Hazel, once vibrant and outspoken, now moved through the house like a ghost. She spoke less, her energy dimmed. Part of me hoped reality had caught up with her, that maybe she was starting to understand just how close she'd come to unraveling everything. But that illusion didn't last long. One evening, she stood in the doorway to the living room, hesitant, almost shy. Alistair, she began, voice gentle. I've been doing more reading on polyamory, on open relationships. I think it's time I tell you everything. Because if there's going to be any hope for trust between us, it has to start with honesty. She sat across from me, her fingers interlaced so tightly her knuckles turned white. I went about this the wrong way, she said. There's something I haven't told you. I shifted in my seat, met her eyes directly. Okay, I'm listening. She inhaled deeply, so deeply I wondered if she'd ever let the breath out. There's a colleague, she finally confessed. His name is Justin. We've been involved. I repeated her words quietly, my voice growing colder. Involved? Are you saying you've slept with him? She nodded, eyes unable to meet mine. It wasn't just physical, she murmured. He makes me feel wanted again, alive, beautiful. I stared at her, my pulse pounding in my ears. After 10 years, the woman I knew was now a stranger. So, you're in love with him? I asked, each word coated in frost. This whole open marriage talk was just a smokescreen, a way to justify what you were already doing. No, she said quickly, defensive. It's not like that. I'm telling you now because I want to fix this. I still love you. I thought maybe we could find a way forward. Together. An open marriage could give us that chance. She reached again for that same word. It's about being modern, Alistair. Evolving. It's not cheating. It's about growth, about shared experiences. Modern? I echoed, a bitter laugh escaping. You think this is progressive? You betray me, hide an affair, and then dress it all up in buzzwords? I shook my head, the disgust too heavy to contain. You're not evolving, Hazel. You're just being selfish, and I won't stay in a marriage built on lies. That's not true, Hazel, and you know it, whether you admit it or not. Her mouth tightened, her eyes sparking with indignation. What's dishonest, she fired back, is how unwilling you are to even consider another perspective. You're stuck in your own rigid beliefs. It's like trying to breathe underwater, Alistair. She pushed herself up from the couch, voice rising. And yes, I resent that. I stood too, unable to stay grounded in that moment. You resent it? I echoed, trying to keep my voice steady. You resent that I fought for this marriage? That I respected the vows we made? That I trusted you? She didn't miss a beat. I resent your refusal to grow. Marriage shouldn't be a prison sentence based on antiquated expectations. I want more from life. I need to feel like I'm living. And Justin gives me that. A harsh laugh escaped me, dry and cutting. Oh, I see. And what am I supposed to get out of this grand vision of yours? Am I just supposed to play house while you sleep with your coworker? You act like this open marriage idea is mutual, but every argument you've made has been all about you. Her reaction gave her away, a subtle flinch, the first crack in her armor. She hadn't thought about what I might want. After a pause, she offered weakly. You could see other women too. It doesn't have to be one-sided. I laughed again, this time colder. How generous of you. Now you're trying to wrap your guilt in equality. You keep saying we, but it's always been you. I never asked for anyone else. I took a breath, anger thick in my chest. I wanted my wife, the person I thought I married. But she's gone, isn't she? For a second, something flickered behind her eyes. Regret, maybe. But she lifted her chin, steeling herself. I won't apologize for needing more than this, she said, her voice calm but firm. And if that's something you can't accept, maybe you're right. Maybe this marriage is already over. The words dropped like a verdict. Final. I felt the silence expand, deep and suffocating. And yet, oddly enough, some invisible pressure eased inside me. I looked at her, this stranger wearing my wife's face, and grief tangled with fury. You're right, I said softly. It is. I told her I'd reach out to a lawyer the next day. We could make the divorce official, handle the paperwork in the coming weeks. She looked stunned, her mouth parting as if to speak, but I was already turning away. I walked down the hall, packed a few essentials, and moved into the guest room. I thought that would be the end of it. But Hazel wasn't ready to let it die quietly. She rallied her closest allies, her mother, Addison, her sister, Sabrina, and two longtime friends, Peggy and Karen. One afternoon, I was sitting at the dining table, casually eating a burger and watching a video online, when they descended like a well-organized army. Hazel led the charge, but Addison quickly took the reins, sliding into the seat across from me with smooth confidence. Alistair, sweetheart, we need to talk. I set my food aside deliberately, folding my arms as I looked them over. Hazel took her place beside Addison. The rest formed a line behind them like some kind of tribunal. The air thickened, the pressure unmistakable. I knew what this was. It wasn't a discussion. It was an ambush. Alistair, Addison said again, sweet but solemn. Please, just listen with an open heart. We're all here because we care. But you need to understand the broader perspective. Relationships today aren't what they used to be. They don't have to be these stifling, traditional boxes. Ethical non-monogamy can be liberating, for both of you. I arched an eyebrow. Liberating? Is that the euphemism we're using for betrayal now? Sabrina rolled her eyes with a scoff. Come on, Alistair. This isn't betrayal. It's called being honest. Hazel had the courage to speak her truth. Do you know how many women suffer in silence for years? And now I'm supposed to applaud her for cheating and giving it a trendy name? I snapped, my voice chilled. Peggy chimed in, voice placating. Okay, maybe she didn't handle everything perfectly, but she's trying to include you in this new chapter. That's what ethical non-monogamy is supposed to be. Honesty, mutual respect, communication. Mutual respect, I repeated, anger flaring. So me not letting my wife turn our relationship into a sideshow makes me the villain? Yes, Karen cut in sharply. She stepped forward, resting a hand on the back of Hazel's chair. Her eyes locked onto mine, burning. You're afraid of change. You cling to these outdated ideals because you're terrified of someone like Justin. It's honestly pathetic. My fists clenched involuntarily. I couldn't care less about Justin, I growled, but it's clear you all do. You're projecting, Karen sneered. You know deep down you can't fulfill her anymore. Justin makes her feel something real, and that scares you. Hazel turned to her, clearly shaken, mouthing no, trying to reel her back. But it was too late. The damage was sealed the moment they barged in. I let out one more bitter laugh and shook my head. At this point, I don't care anymore. Not about her, not about Justin, and definitely not about whatever self-righteous performance this is. I locked my gaze on Karen, rhythmically tapping my finger against the table to punctuate every word. I don't care anymore about who Hazel is sleeping with. Then I turned my eyes on the rest of them. You all seem oblivious to the fact that, for me, this marriage is already done. I let out a breath through clenched teeth, throwing my hands up in sheer frustration. This goes deeper than just feelings. This touches my core, my values, who I am. My eyes swept the room, landing on each of them with unwavering force. You don't get to make a lifelong commitment to someone, knowing exactly what matters most to them, only to flip the script later. What I'm talking about, I continued, is the clear divide between a monogamous commitment and whatever you think this is. One of them opened their mouth to respond, but I raised my hand, cutting them off. Don't waste your breath trying to rebrand betrayal with some trendy euphemism. I saw the annoyance flash across their faces, but I didn't budge. This is about trust, too, don't forget that. And Hazel obliterated it the moment she decided to sneak around and sleep with someone else. Until now, Hazel had been oddly quiet. Then she finally spoke up. I made a mistake, Alistair. I'm trying to make it right. I want us to grow from this. Grow? I repeated, letting the sarcasm bleed into my voice. You honestly believe dragging strangers into our marriage is the way to strengthen it? That's delusional. It's not delusional, Sabrina shot back, her tone sharp. Polyfidelity is a legitimate relationship model. It's about mutual care, transparency, and agreed-upon boundaries. If you could drop the macho ego for 1 second, like Hazel said, you might actually understand it. Oh, right, I snapped. It's never just about intimacy until it suddenly becomes so. Every time someone talks about this lifestyle, it's about how liberating it is to sleep with just anyone. You're being close-minded, Peggy chimed in, disappointment heavy in her voice. If you could let go of that toxic jealousy, you might see how freeing this could be. Hazel's being honest with you, she added. She's offering a new version of your relationship. But you're too afraid to step outside your bubble, too afraid to evolve. I'm not afraid, I said, standing up slowly. I'm grounded. I believe in commitment, in promises that mean something, in honoring the vows you take. I believe in monogamy, and if that makes me old-fashioned or rigid in your eyes, fine. I'll wear that label with pride. But don't you dare try to paint me as the villain for wanting a marriage that matters. Karen crossed her arms, expression hard. Your ego is so inflated, you can't even recognize an opportunity for growth. This could have been a transformation, but your insecurities won't let you imagine Hazel being happy with anyone but you. I narrowed my eyes. Holding her back? Let me be crystal clear. I don't give a damn if she walks out that door right now and jumps into bed with Justin or the whole damn neighborhood. She's the one who cheated. She's the one who broke her word. She means nothing to me anymore. As far as I'm concerned, she's the public's problem now. And now she's got the nerve to turn this around on me, to gaslight me into thinking I'm the one at fault, and the rest of you are eating it up. I pointed toward the door. I've had enough of this circus. All of you, get out, now. Hazel's face flushed red, arms folded tightly, eyes blazing. You don't get to call me a whore just because you're angry. I'm still your wife, Alistair. I laughed. A cold, empty sound. Not in any way that still matters. I haven't seen any divorce papers yet, but don't worry. That's coming. She threw her arms up. You're impossible. You're so obsessed with being right that you'd rather burn everything down than consider a different perspective. No, I said firmly. You set it all on fire the moment your wants became more important than the promises we made. I'm just clearing out the ashes now, taking out the trash. I pointed straight at her. And don't worry about the paperwork. That's already in motion. I've just got a few loose ends to tie up. The room fell silent. The tension thickened like smoke. No one said a word. They just stared, speechless, maybe furious, maybe stunned. Whatever intervention they had in mind had fallen apart completely. Without another word, I grabbed my coat and headed for the door. My attorney will be in touch. Best of luck with your self-discovery journey. You'll need it. And with that, I left them all standing there in stunned silence. Even after that volcanic fallout, I didn't file right away. Naturally, that gave Hazel the wrong idea. She clung to the illusion that maybe, somehow, there was still a chance. Her family, her friends, they all kept reaching out, begging me to reconsider, to stay, to give this so-called open marriage a shot. They mistook my reluctance to leave as a sign their words were getting through, that I might be having second thoughts. What they didn't realize was that I was only stalling, buying time until the private investigator I'd hired came back with solid proof that Hazel and Justin were already involved. I needed undeniable evidence, something concrete that would stand up if she tried to twist the narrative during the divorce, especially with her friends so eager to back her up. It took a few weeks. After our volatile discussions about opening the relationship, Hazel managed to hold herself back, for a time. But her proposal that I accept a degrading arrangement where she could be with someone else while I stood by proved she was already halfway out the door. Eventually, her self-control gave way. The footage the investigator provided confirmed everything I'd feared. Watching it was like pouring gasoline on old embers. But instead of exploding, I redirected the flames. I focused on anything that brought me peace. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. The woman I'd once adored, my wife, was gone. What remained was a shadow of her, someone who cloaked herself in modern ideals while betraying her commitments with a coworker. She'd become manipulative, dishonest, unrecognizable. The moment I held that report in my hands, I initiated the divorce. It was the only path forward, the only way to free myself from something toxic and start to rebuild. There was no salvaging what we once had. She had crossed a boundary I couldn't overlook. That's not to say I walked away without doing something about it. Maybe, just maybe, I mailed an anonymous package to her workplace with everything the investigator found. Who knows? Take this as a cautionary tale. Don't let someone weaponize ideology to pressure you into abandoning your core principles. Cling to your values, if they're grounded in truth and self-respect. But that's a conversation for another day. Hi, I'm Hazel. I know that many of you have already made up your mind about me, but I feel the need to tell the truth, and maybe end this somehow. At the time, I really didn't believe that Alistair would see it through. He mentioned the divorce. He threw it in my face during an argument. But after our last violent confrontation in front of my mom and my friends, when he still hadn't left, I convinced myself that it was just another empty threat. I thought we'd find a way back eventually. But when these divorce papers appeared, I realized how wrong I was, and that he wasn't done with me yet. Barely a few weeks into the legal process, I was called into a meeting with HR. Justin was there too, pale and clearly shaken, avoiding my gaze. My stomach turned. I knew something was off. The HR representative's tone was clinical, expression unreadable, as she detailed what had been submitted. An anonymous complaint, complete with surveillance clips, still shots, time logs, and even copies of my text messages. I still have no clue how those got out. The case was airtight. Every incriminating detail was laid bare. Alistair had exposed everything. It couldn't have been anyone else. I tried to spin it, tried to soften the blow, even tried, God forgive me, to position myself as the victim. I leaned hard into the language of solidarity and in a shameful moment pinned the blame on Justin, claiming he manipulated me. But none of it mattered. The company had a strict policy against relationships between supervisors and subordinates, and the evidence painted a clear picture. I was a willing participant. The HR rep saw through my story. So much for sisterhood. By the end of the week, both Justin and I were out of a job. Losing my career felt like being gutted, but worse still was what followed. Justin, the man I had risked everything for, told me he couldn't move past what I'd done, especially how I tried to deflect responsibility onto him. Betrayal, he called it. The same word Alistair had used. And honestly, he was right. When things collapsed, I tried to protect myself at his expense, If he'd stayed with me after that, I would have lost all respect for him. He would have been just another emotional crutch until someone better came along. I know how awful that sounds, but it's the truth. That was my mindset. Justin ended it face to face and disappeared as quickly as he'd arrived. In the months that followed, I attempted to rebuild, but nothing lasted. The men I dated either ran from my past or didn't want anything real. No one was interested in committing to someone who'd blown up her own life, both marriage and career. Late at night, when everything was still, my thoughts would drift to Alistair, to the life we shared, the love that once meant everything. He wasn't flawless, but he loved me wholly, and I threw it all away. For what? A fleeting sense of independence? A fantasy that quickly dissolved into chaos? I heard, through mutual acquaintances, that Alistair was doing well. He'd gone back to his art, found his footing, and was even seeing someone new. He deserved it. He deserved joy. And I had no one but myself to blame for not being part of that future. The version of me that destroyed our marriage, that wasn't the real me. But it didn't matter. The harm was done. To any woman reading this, take it from me, the grass isn't always greener. Marriage demands effort, real, painful, ongoing work. There are no easy fixes, no quick solutions. If you're with a good man, value him. And know, opening the relationship isn't a clever solution. Believe me, I tried that. It wrecked everything. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.